Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome to Goal Line Hockey. It's Kevin Forte, and today we are going to discuss the Detroit Red Wings. At this year's NHL draft, not only did the Red Wings win on the draft floor in terms of who they drafted, they also won in some trades. They made a couple trades, and we're going to discuss that as well. So let's take a look at the Detroit Red Wings. So the Red Wings had a pretty good last 2 or 3 days, depending on when you watch this video. But for the Detroit Red Wings, this was a huge draft for them, right? The expectations probably this spring were this team should be really pushing for a playoff spot. And I think Steve Yzerman took the patient approach and said, listen, we're going to try and force something that isn't there. And the Red Wings, it paid off for them dearly, as right now they're in a position that is a lot better than where they were earlier this year because of the patience here. Now, what we're looking at here first, of course, is who the Red Wings drafted. So, of course, the Red Wings had a pretty interesting draft this year. They made a couple of interesting picks, but when you know anything about Steve Yzerman, you know that, expect the unexpected. And, kind of looking at how things played out, there's a lot to be excited about if you are a fan of the Red Wings. So, of course, in the first round, their first 2 picks, they had 2 picks in the first round. The first one, of course, being Nate Danielson with the 9th overall selection. Nate Danielson from Red Deer, Alberta. So you already know right off the bat, this is a Western Canadian boy. He's 6'2", 186 pounds already at only 18 years old. He's put up some really good numbers with the Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL. And a lot of comparisons have been to a guy like Bo Horvat. And if that's indeed the case, a lot to be excited about with a guy like Nate Danielson. And considering what the Red Wings already have down the middle, this is a really big impact player to that center core. You're looking at a group that already has Dylan Larkin. They've got Andrew Kopp. And now you add a guy here in Marco Kasper, who we saw a little bit at the end of the year. We're going to see Marco Kasper. We're going to see Nate Danielson. This was a huge pickup for them at that selection. A couple of other guys that they do have, Amadeus Lombardi, Alex Duchette. They have some really good young centers now in the system. And this is something that's going to be important for them as they kind of move forward. Now, taking a look at what they also did, which in my opinion might actually be the best selection for them in the first round, which was at the 17th overall selection. They took Swedish right-handed defenseman Axel Sandin Pellikka. Now, Pellikka is a little bit on the smaller side, 5'11", 180 pounds. The Swedish native is compared a lot to in terms of, you want to think of a defenseman like Oliver Ekman-Larsson in his prime. Of course, not the end of the career for Oliver Ekman-Larsson, but in his prime, a defenseman that can move the puck forward, can produce points. You saw what he did in the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. He picked up 2 points in those 5 games. In the SHL this season, 5 points in 22 games with Skelfata of the SHL. In the World Junior Championships, he picked up an assist for 7 points, but he's a two-way defenseman, and that's something that I think that a lot of Red Wings fans are going to be very happy with. Is he's defensively sound, but also has a touch of offense, which the Red Wings are going to look for on the back end. Now, they've got a couple of really good defensive prospects already on this team. William Wallander, Simon Edvinsson, who of course is the highly touted prospect. They've also got Albert Johansson, who is also expected to be a very good young defenseman. Donovan Sabrango. They have a couple of really good young defensemen in the system. And, of course, you've got guys that are already on the roster. Of course, the biggest name being out there, Moritz Seider, who is their number 1 defenseman. So, when you look at the Red Wings, the way they've been drafting, offensively, defensively, they addressed both their, they really just, at this point, are shoring up things that they already are really good at, right? So, they could have easily said, oh, we have Marco Kasper already and Dylan Larkin, so why do we need another center, right? They could have easily said that. But, there's the saying in hockey, you never have too many centers, because you can always move a center to the wing. And the value of centers in the NHL, we saw that very much on display in the first round. 4 of the top 5 picks were centers, and that is kind of something to look at here, because when we look at the center depth the center position, right? There's so much involved in that position. It's the ability to backcheck. Obviously, the most important one being able to win faceoffs. There's so many different aspects to being a center at the NHL level. And a guy like Nate Danielson coming in alongside Marco Kasper, probably going into next season. Maybe he goes back to the WHL next season. We know Yzerman likes to really groom those prospects and make sure they're really ready to go. I think that won't be anything new here in terms of what they're going to do with Nate Danielson, but he looks like a very promising prospect that maybe it was a safer pick than some of the other guys that were available for the Detroit Red Wings, but I think it's something that is going to pay off for them fairly quickly when you look at the grand scheme of things. Now, you look at what they did in the second round. They picked up another two guys to help out their group. So they brought in Trey Augustine with the 41st selection, a second-round pick. The Michigan native, of course. Michigan native is 18 years old, and he is currently playing with the U.S. National Team Development Program. His numbers have been stellar this year between the World Junior Championships, the USHL, and the USNTDB. He's played he's put up some really good numbers in his time. A .934, an .891 save percentage was his worst in the World Junior Championships, but everything else, he was well above a .900 save percentage. A .928. A .943, a .926. Those are some really good numbers. Now, again, it's the U.S. National Team Development Program, so that obviously is something you have to consider here as well. But nonetheless, his numbers have been stellar. And, I think his World Junior Championship numbers actually hurt him enough where the Red Wings were able to select him here. And this is going to be a big impact goalie for them. I know they've already got a really good goalie that they're kind of watching for in Sebastian Cossa, but Trey Augustine is also somebody to definitely watch for in the Red Wings system. Now, they also drafted right after that. They had back-to-back picks. The St. Louis Blues draft pick they got in the Oscar Sundqvist trade. They decided to go with an Ontario native right-shot defenseman, Andrew Gibson. Now, Gibson has played with the Sault Ste. Marie this past season, 21 points in 45 games as a defenseman. He also picked up 3 assists in his 7 games in the Under-18 World Junior Championship. Another great pickup here by the Detroit Red Wings. So, not only did the Red Wings add, they've added 2 defensemen in the first 2 rounds. They've added a big-name center in the top 10, and they also picked up another goalie prospect. What more could the Red Wings have honestly asked for, right? This is a really well-developed, oiled machine here in Detroit. And, they didn't need to add any more wingers because, A, one of these centers could end up going to the wing, and B, you look at some of their winger depth already that they have. They brought in Robbie Fabry a couple years ago. They just brought in, who we're going to talk about here in a minute, Keller Yamamoto. They've got Philip Zadina, Jonathan Berggren, Lucas Raymond. They have some really good young winger prospects already on the team, and more to come. They've got Elmer Soderblom coming in, Cross Honest. They've got some really good players. Lombardi, right? All those guys can fill out the rest of the lineup for the Red Wings. So, to say, oh, well, now they need a winger, not necessarily. Now, that's what I want to get to next, which is the trade that Steve Yzerman made with his former Red Wings general manager, Ken Holland, up in Edmonton, as the Edmonton Oilers trade Keller Yamamoto and Klim Kostin in exchange for future consideration. So the Red Wings basically get Yamamoto and Kostin for free. Now, to break it down, Klim Kostin is a RFA with arbitration rights this summer. He's a 24-year-old winger. He's still fairly young. He's 6'3", 212 pounds, so he's definitely a bigger body. But you look at what he's done here over the last 2 years. St. Louis was his team 2 years ago. He was drafted by the Blues. He played 3 seasons in St. Louis. Wasn't able to really put together that offensive production. He was finally able to do that last year in Edmonton. In 57 games with the Oilers, he picked up 11 goals, 10 assists, 21 points in 57 games with the Edmonton Oilers last season. He also played a couple games with the Bakersfield Condor, but he spent most of his season in Edmonton. Klim Kostin's a really good player, and we saw him kind of protecting Connor McDavid last year. I think this is a vital piece that the Oilers are losing here, and as obviously he doesn't have the value of Keller Yamamoto, the Oilers don't have the cap space, and at the end of the day, these are cap casualties that the Red Wings Steve Yzerman, give him credit. He was able to find guys that are, teams that are basically vulnerable to losing young players like this, like Klim Kostin, who is a guy that if the Red Wings make the playoffs, could be the next kind of Tyler Bertuzzi-esque player for the Detroit Red Wings, right? Maybe not the upside of Bertuzzi, but that similar type of, tough to play against, protecting the young guys type of player. That's what you're getting here in Klim Kostin. And of course, he's not afraid to drop the gloves. I don't think it's going to take him long to be a fan favorite up in Hockeytown. Now, of course, the bigger asset in this deal is another 24-year-old winger from Spokane. This is Kailer Yamamoto. Now, he is listed as a right winger for the Detroit Red Wings here, and he's on the final year. He signed a 2-year deal back in 2022 with the Edmonton Oilers. He's making $3.1 million per season, so he's making $3.1 million this season. He has he's basically going to be walking into RFA territory next summer, I believe. Which, if that's the case, the Red Wings have to obviously consider what are they going to do with him next year, because his contract does come to an end. So the Red Wings are going to have to find a way to either make a move with him, either trading him or deciding to sign him long term. But knowing Steve Yzerman, I think he's bringing this guy in knowing that he's probably got the idea of a framework or a blueprint of what a big contract could look like for Kailer Yamamoto. The Red Wings are really adding more scoring depth to this team. And like I said earlier, you look at the winger group that they've got. You've got David Perron. You've got Robbie Fabry, Kailer Yamamoto, Dominic Kubalik, Philip Zadina, Jonathan Berggren, Lucas Raymond. Now you add Klim Kostin. They've got some really good players here. Now, I do think inevitably it's going to lead to some of their RFAs and UFAs that they currently have probably not sticking around. You wonder about guys like Matt Luff. Honestly, I wonder what's going to happen with some of their other young prospects, guys like Philip Zadina, Joe Veleno. Is this kind of the writing on the wall for those players as the Red Wings are kind of moving in a different direction? Probably. But overall, I think the Red Wings did a really good job at this year's draft. And like I said in the beginning of the video, not only drafting guys, right? It's easy to just draft the guy and call it a day. It's the ability by Steve Yzerman to make those little trades like bringing in Kailer Yamamoto, Klim Kostin, and finding a way to develop that group and not just being patient, right? Patience is a virtue, absolutely, but also being proactive. And when there's opportunities out there like a Kailer Yamamoto and a Klim Kostin, jumping out and attacking it and basically getting two guys that are instantly going to add impact to your team next season, basically for free. And the only thing they're really doing here is freeing up the cap space for the Oilers. That is literally it. And that is where Steve Yzerman gets his accolades as a GM, is for those kind of shrewd moves. The Robbie Fabry trade a couple years ago, that was a really good trade for the Red Wings, looking back. I think they traded they traded like some defenseman that was never really going to pan out, and they got a really good top six winger in Robbie Fabry, and they kind of did the same thing here. They also picked up Klim Kostin, who's probably going to be maybe at best second line guy, more likely a third line guy, just producing every now and then, right? Able to score. We saw that last season. And of course, Yamamoto, a bona fide top six winger. Really good pickup there. Like I said, Nate Danielson, probably going to be a second or third line center in his career in the NHL. Yeah, it was a safer bet for the Red Wings, but you know what? That's what we like to see from Steve Yzerman. And then he goes out and picks up Axel Sandin Pellikka as a right shot defenseman, another great potential top four defenseman in the National Hockey League. And then you add the other right shot defenseman they added in the second round, the goaltender Trey Augustine. A great job overall by Steve Yzerman. And yeah, that's what I think of the Red Wings. I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of the Red Wings draft? And of course, the trades by Steve Yzerman. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.